Hi everyone, I'm Sandy, and today I am here with my reviews and rankings for the BookTube quarterfinal round. Last time I did a fast wrap up video and didn't go into the books in that much detail, and this time I decided I'm going to record my thoughts about each book as I go through them because I have a horrible memory and don't want to miss any of these details, and if it's 2 months before I do the full wrap up, yikes. So today, yeah, you'll see my outfits change and all kinds of good stuff, hopefully, as I go through these. But the first book that I read, I was able to get from the library, which was this book, Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist memoir of the Jim Crow South by Winfred Rembert. I kept thinking this was Winifred, and no, it's Winfred. Winfred is an artist who grew up in the South, and you can see on the back here you picture here he grew up extremely poor, and his mother worked in not mother his mother abandoned him at a very young age. He worked in the cotton fields. He didn't get to go to school. He ended up, going to jail for a time. He had, history with civil rights movement. He had a fascinating life that was extremely troubled and very difficult at times. He was fortunate to find the love of his life, whose name was Patsy. And Patsy really supported him through a lot of problems that he had as well. But what made this book really amazing is that it has a lot of his artwork in it. So Winfred Rembert was a artist who did paintings on leather, and so used a lot of tools to kind of carve out the silhouettes of what he wanted to paint, and then he painted directly on the leather. And it was a unique medium. Most artists don't paint on leather, and so it was very, very special. And he learned that skill actually when he was in prison, of how to work leather, that there was someone in there that was doing that all the time, and he was able to learn that skill. The parts of this, as I was reading it, what I really enjoyed about this book is he would give the background of what was going on, and then it would be framed with one of his paintings. And there were a lot of traumatic events that were documented in the paintings that were just incredibly moving. So I really liked this book quite a bit. I don't know where it will fall yet in the rankings, but his documenting his life in paintings was very, very effective. The voice in this, his voice came through loud and clear, even though he told this to someone else who wrote the book for him. It was just something that as I was going through it, I was just immediately pulled into Winfred Rembert's life and wanted to learn more about him as I went. As you can see, this is a library book. I picked this up on Friday and finished it on Saturday. No, Sunday. I finished this on Sunday. So it took me a few days to read this, but it was just absolutely amazing. And so all of his artwork is throughout this book, and it's just incredible. So I wish I could see his artwork in real life. But this was the first book on the BookTube prize that I read. We'll see how it does with the rest of the books. So on to the next one. The book that I read second for the quarterfinals is Empire of Pain by Radden Keefe. This book is infuriating. I will just say that right up front. It is really all about the opioid epidemic that we have, but focuses really on the Sackler family, who is the family behind Purdue Pharma. Purdue Pharma had the patent for OxyContin for the last 20 plus years. And so it really digs into this Sackler dynasty, as the cover says, and just kind of goes through piece by piece the Sacklers' involvement in Purdue Pharma and their role in the opioid crisis that we have now. And so it starts off with Arthur Sackler and his two brothers, Mortimer and Raymond. And they were really innovative in how they marketed and how they came up with the first drug that they really did was Valium, and how they marketed it as just an everyday kind of a drug. And even when they had a competing drug, they were masterful in saying, oh, this drug could be used for anxiety and this drug could be used for something else. Even though they did exactly the same thing, he was pretty masterful, Arthur Sackler, behind the scenes and pulling those strings and learning very early how advertising can help in promoting a drug. He also had an advertising branch that he owned behind the scenes. He was very careful about keeping his name out of things, but he was pulling a lot of strings behind the scenes. He also had medical journals that he would have, and founded, I think it was a statistics company, a research company that was investigating drugs that they were creating. It's just like multifaceted layers of influence, as well as obviously having some connections in the CDC and the local government. Arthur Sackler was very involved in the arts, wanted to be someone revered in the arts, wanted his name on everything. There was wings at the Met, at the Louvre, at the Smithsonian. He was very keen on being seen as someone who was very endowed in the arts. That's not the whole first section. The second section is really where you start getting OxyContin more. Or where you start getting OxyContin. So they developed this very powerful painkiller that was stronger than morphine, but they said, oh no, it could be used for everyday pain. And not only did they develop this very powerful drug, they said it didn't have any adverse effects because you can't abuse it because of the slow release coating that they put on it. And they patented that and had held that patent on OxyContin for a very long time. So they went through, the Sackler family behind the scenes in Purdue Pharma was pulling the strings of all of the OxyContin marketing, all of the push of the drugs. How can we sell more, more, more? Even as they were starting to get reports from their own sales team about overdoses and abuse and people creating pill mills, all these different things. It was always about more money, more money, more money. What the book does an excellent job of is painting the Sacklers as a family who has zero empathy and zero cares about anything other than money and maybe having their name on things. They really continued that tradition of donating money to schools, to art, like the Guggenheim, in order to have their name places, to the level of some absurdity. I think one of my favorite ones was at the Tate Modern in England. They had put their name on an escalator. It's like, really? Okay. But that's how much they cared about having their name out there. They never wanted their name associated with Purdue Pharma, with the opioid crisis. They went through a lot to try and keep their name out of that. The very last section is really where it starts to fold in on the family, where they're starting to get lawsuits, they're starting to get protests, and people are starting to now pay attention and say, we don't want your money anymore. We're going to remove your name from our facilities. We don't think it's what your business is counter to what we believe. But it didn't start happening until fairly recently, within the last few years. And so the Sackler family really had a run of making billions on the lives of people who were some of the most vulnerable in our society, people who have chronic pain. And they always blamed the addict. They never said that they did anything wrong. They had a stance all throughout the book of no accountability, no responsibility to what was happening. Even if you believe only half of what's in this book, it's infuriating. If you believe the whole thing, it makes you want to just throw it against the wall. It is one of those books that you don't want it to be true. And hope that, okay, maybe that didn't actually happen that way. The Sacklers refused to be interviewed for this book, which is also very much their pattern, according to this book, that they didn't want to be in the public eye. They put steps in place to try and prevent this book from being released, and it was a fascinating read. Of course, I want this big ending with this big comeuppance of them having to pay huge fines. And the reality is that it hasn't ended yet, that this is still going on, that this is still being fought. Just very horrible representation, or great representation of a horrible family. And yeah, it's just, yeah, the lack of like awareness of what's happening is just astronomical in this book. So yeah, that was the second book. I need to pick one of the ones that might be cheerier after this one, because this left me a bit sad. It left me a bit angry, and I wanted something that hasn't happened, which is them having some accountability, at least at the end of this book. So that was Empire of Pain, compared to Chasing Me to My Grave by Winfred Rembert. These are the two books I've read. So what would I do with these two? I think I'm still going to go this way right now as my number one and number two. We'll see how that plays out, mainly because I was more inspired by Winfred Rembert after this, and how much he was able to accomplish in his life, where this one just makes me mad. But it's an excellent book. It's just the topic of these two, I put this one over so far. So we'll see what happens when I go on to number three. Okay, book number three was Diary of a Young Naturalist by Dara McAnulty. This book was written by Dara when he was 14 or 15, which is incredibly impressive. Dara is someone who in the book says that he is autistic and is going through and talking about his love of nature, of activism, of the effects of like bullying that he had in school, going and talking about just frustration with people lack of caring sometimes about the environment, and goes through a section of 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and fall, around a time when his family was getting ready to pick up and move to another house, another school. So lots of time of change in Dara's life when he was writing this. He was encouraged to write this after posting blogs where people said you should really write a book. And so that's how this book was apparently how it came to fruition. But it is a really interesting read. I feel a lot of just kindred spirits with love of the outdoors and some of that. It was also really interesting to read his experiences and how some things may affect him more than someone else. And so I thought that was really interesting to read. This was not a bad book in any way, shape, or form. I was really interested and engaged in learning more about his life and what he was doing from an activism perspective, and how he was getting involved and the anxiety that it caused. I think all of that was truly, truly brilliant. And so, yeah, it was a really good read. I can see why it moved on in the BookTube Prize. I will already tell you, though, that I am having a struggle ranking these books. So this is the third book I've read. I also have here Empire of Pain, which was book 2, and I have Chasing Me to My Grave, which was the first book that I read. These two were being ranked this way. And so this one, my struggle with this one is I don't think it hit me as hard as these two. While this is an excellent book, I still putting these two above it. So right now, this one is going in, if I can get it correct, in the third spot. It's hard to do that right now, though. So we're here. We're right here. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if that one changes. On to book 4. All right, book 4 is All In by Billie Jean King, an autobiography. So Billie Jean King is a professional tennis player who had great success in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. Absolutely amazing tennis player with multiple championships in her pocket. She was the top number 1 player 7 out of 10 years, I believe, between the years 66 and 76. Absolutely amazing tennis player. I knew nothing about Billie Jean King prior to starting this book. I am not a tennis fan. I don't watch tennis, any tennis really. I don't watch Wimbledon. It's just never been a sport that I've been interested in. I've tried to play it, I think, twice, and it didn't go well. So this autobiography goes from when Billie Jean is a very small child all the way up to the last couple of years. And so it's a very comprehensive autobiography. And it documents really how she felt like she won the genetics lottery, as being so proficient at this. It talked about her saving up to buy her first tennis racket, the luck she had in where she lived, in her access to some coaches, all through her, up until the last couple of years, like I said. And she really goes through all the struggles that she had as a young player, being considered an amateur, not having all the places to play, not making any money, having a real struggle earning a living. She talks a lot in different parts about her sexuality and being confused about being attracted to both men and women. It goes through her marriage, who was married to someone named Larry King, which I always thought was the talk show host kind of, but it's not the same Larry King. Very important point. But it goes through her efforts where she tried to just level the playing field for women in tennis and in all sports, and was instrumental in getting a women's tour organized, getting professional status for women players, the ability to make money for women, tried to even out the pay disparity between men and women in tennis and in other sports, and really just pushed really hard for women's equality. She also famously played a tennis match against Bobby Riggs called Battle of the Sexes. There was a movie in 2017 where Steve Carell and Emma Stone were in that, playing Bobby Riggs and Billie Jean, which I have not watched yet. But just kind of tells you how iconic that match was and how much she was really fighting for. She knew if she lost that match that it would set women's rights in sports back a very long time. But she is very cryptic and self-deprecating in this book as well. She's very honest about her faults, about mistakes that she made, choices that she made that she wishes she did differently, things that bother her all throughout her life, including when she was outed as a lesbian before she was ready. And it was very sad, that whole scenario that happened to her in that regard. But also how supportive she was of so many people, other champions coming up through the ranks, other people who were in the same position that she was in. She was really amazing. She really is. She hasn't passed away. Amazing person. And for someone who knows nothing about tennis, it was really enlightening to read this book. I had no idea how Title IX came about, how, I knew about pay disparity between men and women in the workplace and in sports, but not to the level of extent that she was referencing in this book, like where men's prize would be $10,000 and the women's prize would be something like $1,000. I mean, to the 10-to-1 type of a ratio of disparity between the pay. And just how instrumental she was. Definitely someone to be admired for a lot that she did in her life. She had some problematic times, some problematic things. But overall, this was an extremely well-written biography. I feel like I know so much more about her and about tennis in general and about Title IX and women in sports, just all of those different pieces. And just incredible, absolutely incredible, because even to this day, she's still fighting for equality and rights. The book is peppered with famous people like Elton John or Barack Obama, and just how much she continued to try and push for all different kinds of rights and just a supporter of human rights in general. She got to meet Nelson Mandela as well, which is really incredible. But yeah, what an amazing life she has had. It's a very inspiring life, even though there were, some tricky and problematic times for her. So, but All In by Billie Jean King. I'm surprised I like this one as much as I did. But it puts me in a bit of a pickle. So this is my fourth book. And so these are the four that I have read so far. And I don't know what to do now. I'm trying to decide, do I like this one better than these two? The only one I'm still kind of in the, where it's going to be is this last one, because compared to the other three, I liked this one. It falls definitely down towards the bottom. But I don't know. I'm going to leave it with that and say, I just don't know now where I'm going. Stay tuned to see where it ends up. All right, on to book 5. All right, so book number 5 is A Little Devil in America by Hanif Abdurraqib. I'm not sure if I'm saying that last name correctly, and I apologize. I did try and go out and find it and just wasn't able to find the right pronunciation, so I apologize if I'm saying that incorrectly. This particular book, you can see on the very top, it says Notes in Praise of Black Performance. It really goes through in the form of kind of essays and talks about a wide variety of performances, and it goes through and it starts starts really with, I can't remember which one it started with, but it goes through performers like Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston. It talks a little bit about Sammy Davis Jr. It talks about marathon dance competitions in the late 30s, in the 1930s. It goes through and talks about a wide variety of Black performances. And I loved learning more about that. I loved being able to kind of see these performances through a different perspective. It goes through Soul Train. It goes through popular movies like Green Book, and it talks about The Help, and really goes through a really interesting perspective on that time period, on those time periods. It also has really interesting things to say about performers like Whitney Houston and kind of what she went through as a Black performer and how she was deemed not Black enough, which I thought was really interesting. Lots of just amazing information. It actually gave me a completely different perspective on the movie and the book, The Help, which I thought it's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite movies. I thought it was adapted really well. And what was interesting is like the reaction of other races maybe wasn't as positive as what I had. So I really appreciated the perspective. I appreciated the narrative. The writing, as far as like the content, was really amazing. But, and I'm sorry for this if it's an unpopular opinion, this is rated extremely high on Goodreads. It's 4.66 with maybe only 5 like 1-star reviews on it. This book did not quite work for me. And the reason is because it's in the form of essays, in the form of some stream of consciousness sections. And for me, I always struggle with those. This is not a negative about the author, a negative about the book. It is, for me personally, they just don't work. I have struggled with stream of consciousness novels, a novel like Duck's Newburyport. Probably not going to read that one anytime soon, where it's basically one long continuous sentence. And so there are pages in this that are that. It's always continuing on, and this, and that, and this, and that. And so the format of it, the content got lost for me a little bit in the format of the book. And I think that is more just kind of like my preference as a reader. I wouldn't call it a bad book. I think there's so much great information in it. I think that it was really informative. I thought I was really happy to have read it. For me, essays just don't work. But yeah, that was BookTube Spin. That is BookTube Prize, book number 5. So where does this one fall in my rankings? Right now I'm going to move this one. I am putting it at the bottom right now. We'll see if it changes. I think right now, I think this is kind of where I'm at as far as my current rankings, with one more book left to go. I may change, but right now this is where I'm going to say I'm at. Unfortunately, Little Devil in America's format just did not work for me. But like I said, lots of amazing information in it. But right now, we're going to go kind of with that and see. I haven't fully made up my mind. On to book 6. All right, book number 6, the final book in the BookTube Prize is The Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nimura. So this book really talks about 2 sisters, Elizabeth and Emily Blackwell, and their quest to become doctors. It really starts with Elizabeth Blackwell, and she applied to many medical schools and was just flat out denied acceptance, just rejected over and over and over again. She finally applied to a Geneva medical school I believe it was in New York, and was accepted because the student body voted her in and said yes, because the administration didn't want to take a stand, so they put it to the students. And the students jokingly, it seems like, accepted her, gave her an acceptance to the medical school. And she just thrived in that first medical school, really did well, garnered the respect of her instructors, her professors, and the other students, and just was very forthright as she's portrayed in this book, as a very capable doctor, and just a fascinating story as far as how she went about getting into medical school. Practicing medicine was a much harder a much harder endeavor, though. She ended up going to Europe, Elizabeth did, and practicing there, and unfortunately got an infection in one of her eyes and lost one eye and almost lost the other, which would have ended her medical career immediately. It did end her dreams of being a surgeon. But she continued to fight to try and practice medicine. And she opened a women's hospital, a small practice, trying to get people to come in and see her as a doctor. Her sister Emily took a little bit longer to really try and get accepted, and unfortunately ran into the same barriers when she was first trying to get accepted to medical school. So many places told her no. It took her a long time to be able to get in. And then she really did train as a surgeon. And so it was a fascinating process reading about these two sisters, how they went about everything, kind of how they didn't necessarily want to be part of the suffrage movement. They wanted to be doctors, which I thought was also very interesting in the book. It does reference some things like Florence Nightingale a little bit, which I find really fascinating, that I knew who Florence Nightingale was, or at least knew her name, but had never heard of Elizabeth Blackwell, the first MD, first woman MD in the United States. So it's really fascinating how what information made it through, and why did Florence Nightingale become so well known when Elizabeth Blackwell, who had a much more prestigious position, did not. And some of it is that nursing was seen as an acceptable profession, and even Florence Nightingale herself, as referenced in the book, thought women should be nurses and not doctors. So they were fighting quite a bit of just stereotypical backlash of trying to become doctors in a time when that wasn't the case for women. So the book itself was really engaging in the beginning, and then towards the end it fizzled out a little bit for me. And I think that's actually kind of how the sisters' ends of their careers and the ends of their lives really just kind of manifested. That just didn't lend itself to this amazing culmination of the story. Their hospital ended up being, stopped operating because slowly other facilities started to have women be accepted into medical school. And once that happened, there was no need for a women-only hospital or facility or medical school anymore. And so when that happened, it just felt like the story fizzled a little bit at the end. I read this week, which is the week of May 9th, May 9th, and the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction, Pulitzer Prize announcements came out this week, and this book was nominated for a Pulitzer. I thought that was really interesting as well, maybe bringing a little bit of light to their story, which I love so much. It did not win the Pulitzer. It was nominated, or was one of the 3 shortlisted in biography. So, but yeah, The Doctor's Blackwell, and with that one, I am done. So, all right. So the short of it is, for my rankings, where I was at. Let me show you where I started at book 6. This is what the list looked like, and I'm going to give you my final rankings. So let's jump in. I'm so excited to be done. Before I get into this, I would not be unhappy if any of these books made it forward. I got an exceptional group of nonfiction. I enjoyed all of these books, a couple more than others, but really, if any of them make it through, I would be ecstatic if any of them. Of course 3 of them are going to make it through, but I wouldn't be unhappy if any of these made it through. There's not one, like in fiction, when I read it in the first round, that I was like, I just didn't like that book. That is not the case with this round. So let's go. Book number 6 in my rankings is Little Devil in America. So it just didn't work for me. I loved the history. I loved the different perspective. It was from that side. I liked this book quite a bit, but it is ending up in my number 6 spot because Stream of Consciousness, not that there was a lot in here, but also the essay kind of style is not my favorite style of writing. And so I think it's more on me as the reader and not necessarily the book. But compared to the other books, I just liked this one quite a bit less. So that one is in number 6 spot. Number 5 is going to still be Diary of a Young Naturalist by Dara McAnulty. And so this book, the whole thing with this one was the journal entry diary kind of kind of format was not my favorite. It just how it was told. Very impressed with this young man and writing a book at such a young age. I think that's phenomenal. But it did end up in my 5th spot just because I wasn't super or sorry, it did end up in the 4th spot because compared to the other ones, it just was a little bit lower on my list. Okay, so then my next 3 I'm waffling back and forth on, but I think what I'm going to do is say that book number 4 is The Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nimura. And mainly because compared to the other 3, this one didn't engage me as much. I'm very impressed that it was nominated for a Pulitzer. I think that's amazing. But for me, it ended up in my 4 spot, which is fine. It ended up in the 4th spot. But yeah, it's really hard to put this one down in the 4th spot, but The Doctor's Blackwell. Okay, so for the 3rd one, I'm switching it up a little bit from what I showed earlier, only because in thinking about it, the book that has stuck with me over this time, and the one that didn't as much. So number 3 is a switch, and it is All In by Billie Jean King. And I'm moving this one because the number 2 book I have thought about more and more and more, and continue just to be engaged in that topic and really excited about that topic. This one, she's an amazing person. I hope it goes on to the next round. I really do, because I'd love to see what other people think of this book. She is an amazing person. And the ending of the book might have slowed down a little bit and was a little bit harder to get through some of that last piece of it. But I was very impressed with this book. Okay. And then my number 2 book is going to be Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. Oh man, this book still enrages me when I think about it, which is why I'm moving it into the number 2 spot, because it is one that it will stick with me for such a long time. And I think that's truly brilliant. I just am so impressed with the writing, going through the whole book and just knowing how frustrated I was throughout this entire book, but how just incredible it was. So this is my number 2. Yay! All right. So my number 1 has been on my number 1 spot all along, ever since I read it. So I read it first as well, which is incredible, but it's also even more incredible because it is Chasing Me to My Grave, an artist's memoir of the Jim Crow South by Winfred Rembert. This just won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction in biography. It has been in my number 1 spot all along. If you look back through the video, absolutely been in the number 1 spot. I really like this book quite a bit. I'm so thrilled that it won the Pulitzer. I'm happy to have it in my first place spot. I will say I was kind of like, well, should I reread it? Should I go back and check it again? Why is this one so moving to me? And then when it won the Pulitzer, I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to try and go back and re-look through the book again. This book, the artwork and the choices that they made as far as where they placed the artwork was incredible. And Winfred had an absolutely just a chaotic and interesting life, and his artwork in this book is absolutely fantastic. So I'm so thrilled it won the Pulitzer, and it is in my number 1 spot. Yay! So those are my official rankings for the BookTube Prize quarterfinals nonfiction round. But yeah, I'm so happy this one is in my number 1 spot. Yeah, so that's it. My BookTube Prize. I am still waffling. It's May 11th when I'm recording this. I'm still waffling a bit on whether or not I will judge the next round. I'm leaning towards no, because I have so many books to read for other projects, but I've had so much fun. And thank you to everyone who is watching this video and has supported the BookTube Prize. It is an absolute blast. I definitely would recommend, if you haven't haven't judged and you're part of the booktube community, you don't have to have a channel, that you try it and see if you like being a judge, because I read so many books that I would have never picked up, and so many books that I just felt like were amazing this round. So and that's all. So as always, like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, everyone, thanks, bye.